Alright, it's time to gird up your loins and start learning about the loanable funds graph. Alright? This, my brothers, and sisters, is the loanable funds graph. Alright? What this tells us is the amount of loanable funds. And when we say loanable funds, we mean funds that are out there, whether those are bonds, like bonds that are bought or sold in the money supply. We're talking about M1, right? The money that's out there for people to borrow to invest. Funds that are to be loaned out. Loanable funds. So when banks loan money out, that increases the supply of loanable funds. Yes? Alright? When there is less loanable funds, it moves to the left and interest rates go up. We have real interest rates on the Y and we have loanable funds on the X. Okay? D, the original demand line, is private investment. Where private investment are just firms and households that are trying to borrow money to invest in, buying a car, buying a house, building capital equipment, whatever. The I portion of AD. Okay? So the second D is private investment. Alright? Plus government minus taxes. That is to say, every time we have fiscal policy that puts us into debt, that is to say we lower taxes or we increase government spending, right? So if we increase government spending and we increase taxes, then this line doesn't move. Alright, we stay here. But every time we spend money and cut taxes, this line moves. So all year you guys keep asking about, why is debt bad? Why is debt bad? Why is debt bad? Well, here we go, brothers and sisters. I'm going to answer it for you. Alright, Sim? So we're going to see what's going to be going on. So all of your radical plans might be stymied because of this. And I won't mention their name, but someone who sits in that seat over there is probably laughing at that person over there now because, they can say, I told you so. So anyway, here's what happens. At investment I, that's to say the demand for loanable funds, the private demand, households and businesses, demand for loanable funds is D sub I. And here's the supply. Where this hits gives us the interest rate and at this investment level. Alright? So investment level I and real interest rate R. But what happens is if we have expansionary fiscal policy, if we expand our government, if we lower taxes or raise government spending, that will push us out here. And what that does is it raises interest rates to R sub 1. And here's the tricky part. At R sub 1, the private demand for investment hits the demand curve, hits the interest rate right here. So they're only going to demand I sub 2, where at this rate, I sub 1 is going to be the demand or the quantity of loanable funds with investment plus government minus taxes. So this area between I sub 2 and I sub 1 is called the crowding out effect. The crowding out effect means when the government spends more and more money it doesn't have, it's taking money from businesses that they would have gotten for loans, and it's pushing them out of investment. It's pushing interest rates up. So here's interest rate, I don't know if you can see me or not, but here's the interest rate R, and here's how much they want to invest. So when the government does this, it pushes interest rates to here. Well, at this level, right, you go over to the vertical axis until you hit the original investment demand line. And at this level, this is the only amount that we're going to demand now. They're going to demand I sub 2. And here's how much the government's going to be demanding plus investment. And the difference between the two is how much private investment is crowded out. Private investment will not be investing as much because interest rates have gone up. And in doing that, you've taken away the efficiency of the economy. Okay? So the question is, what's that have to do here, and how do they belong to each other? So let's say that we have expansionary fiscal policy, alright? So we move AD to AD sub 1, right? And that pushes us this way. We have a new price level, we have a new output, alright? So what's going to happen on the money market graph? Say it out loud. All right, what's going to happen on the money market graph is demand's going to change, right? So we're going to have money demand sub 1, and we're going to have a new interest rate. All right? As we have spent more money, more government money without raising taxes, that's pushing us from D investment, D sub I, all the way out to total demand for loanable funds, which has pushed interest rates up, as you can see here. Remember we said real interest rates equal nominal minus inflation, right? Well, if nominal interest rates are going up and inflation's going up, it depends on how much each one is going up to tell if real's going up. But if real does go up, if real interest rates do go up, then that's going to crowd out business. And if it crowds out business, what's going to happen to the AD curve? It's going to shift back, right? AD will shift in this direction. AD will say sub 2, right? And it lowers prices, lowers. So let's say that, okay, so we've had this expansionary fiscal policy, right? So fiscal policy expands, it affects the loanable funds graph, it affects the money market graph. So now what can the Fed do? If the Fed wants to counteract this policy, this fiscal policy, what can the Fed do to bring down interest rates and to fix the loanable funds problem? Does anyone have a suggestion? I'll pause, and if you have a suggestion, shout it out and gain the support of your economic buddies. You're right. We can have expansionary monetary policy. And what's going to change here? All right. What's going to change? MS, right? So now MS sub 1 hits the demand curve. We'll say MS sub 1. It pushes us this way, right? It hits, right? So you have a lower interest rate now. So interest rates have gone down. And if interest rates go down, that's because money supply has increased. Well, if money supply has increased, M1 has increased, how will that affect the loanable funds graph? What part of the loanable funds graph will change, I ask? The answer is, I'll find the green marker, the answer is, since the supply of money has increased, then the supply of loanable funds has increased, right? Because there's more money out there to be loaned out. So the supply has shifted, supply sub 1, right? And we hit the new demand curve at the new supply curve. And that goes back to our old interest rate. And now we have not crowded out because we're back at the original investment section for D sub I. I know this sounds confusing, because I've gone really fast. So what I would do if I were you is have the teacher pause it or stop it and go over it again. It's only 8.5 minutes. So what I can do is, what I want everyone to do is I want everyone to draw a blank ADAS graph, a blank money market graph, and a blank loanable funds graph real fast. All right? And then I'm going to give you a problem, and we'll see if you can work it out. And then you can pause it while everyone works it out, and then see how you did combining fiscal and monetary policy and loanable funds graph to boot, right? So here is ADAS, real GDP, price level, here's AD, here's SRAS, all right? So we have, and then here's our output, and here's our price, right? Here is our money market graph. MS, MD, here's our interest rate, right? And then we'll do purple for the loanable funds graph, right? Here's loanable funds. Here is interest rates, right? Real interest rates. Here's demand sub investment, right? Here is supply. Here is demand investment plus G minus T for government minus taxes, all right? And then, actually, you know what we'll do is, we'll go ahead and just start it with this graph here, right? So here is our interest rate, and here is the investment, all right? And we'll go real slowly, and by real slowly I mean the next few minutes before I can get this off of YouTube. So, if we have expansionary fiscal policy, show me what's going to happen on each graph in the short run. Alright, so and just on these two graphs. Alright, so pause it, and then in the short run, if we have expansionary monetary policy, what's going to happen here, and then as a result, what's going to happen here. So pause it. Alright, should be back now. So we're going to expand AD sub 1. That will push Y sub 1 here, and price sub 1 right here. What should change on the money market graph? Answer? Alright. So MD sub 1 pushes interest rates to interest rate sub 1, right? Which will bring AD down a little bit because the investment portion has been taken. Okay, well, if we've expanded, if we had expansionary fiscal policy, what has changed on the loanable funds graph? So pause it, and I want you to now put on the loanable funds graph what has changed. So pause it. Alright, you should be back. So you should have, there is a higher demand for loanable funds because the government is borrowing money. If G increases, they've had to buy bonds, right? The government, the only way the government funds itself is by buying up bonds. And by buying up bonds, it's increasing the demand for loanable funds, right? It needs, the government's selling bonds. The government's selling bonds and getting money for itself. So it's having a higher demand. The government needs money, it's selling bonds, it's selling treasury bonds, right? So there's a higher demand for money. So this would be D sub I plus G minus taxes, right? And so now here's the new interest rate, and what has happened? Here is the new investment. This is how much loanable funds are demanded now because of the new demand curve. But at this interest rate, here's the investment for just private investment. At this interest rate, they only want to get this much money at a higher interest rate. So what do we call this section right here? Where business has been pushed out or crowded out. We call it the crowding out effect, right? So because of this, what can the Fed do? It can increase the money supply, pushing it this way, right? And then the interest rates go, you can have a even lower interest rate. And what that will do is increase what here? It will increase the supply because M1 is increasing the supply of money that can be loaned out. Well, if the supply of money can be loaned out, obviously that's going to change supply. Supply sub 1, and interest rates go down, and investment goes up, and the crowding out effect has been fixed. Can you do this? Can you do this for contractionary fiscal policy? Of course you can. AD goes this way, so MD goes down, the interest rates go down, so the loanable funds, the demand for loanable funds will be decreased, and interest rates will go down. But there won't be a crowding out effect. Crowding out effect only occurs during the expansionary monetary policy. Now there is one more effect. It's called the Ricardo-Barrow effect. And sometimes it's a small effect, but sometimes what happens is that when people see that crowding out might be occurring, what they'll do is they'll hang on to, or they'll keep more money in savings. Right? And if they keep more money in savings, what that will do is it will push supply artificially this way, right? And if it pushes supply down, it will have a small impact on the interest rates going down, and that can have a positive effect on crowding out. It won't crowd out as much. Although what happens when people start saving more, as you know, AD doesn't shift up as much because they're not spending as much. So AD would shift out a little bit less, and supply of this would go a little bit lower. It's a very small effect. It's called the Ricardo-Barrow effect, all right? You guys need to go over this again, and then once you're done, I need to complete activity 44 by the end of the period. And if you have questions, let me know, and I'll get everything to you back on Friday.